Welcome to the IAM working group meeting. We've got Hideaki Goto to talk to us about eduroam and OpenRoaming deployments. Then I'll be talking about Federated Single Logout, what it is, why it's difficult, and should we bother. And then we've got a discussion on iFIRExMAN project from the project team of Farhan and Brook and myself. And then a quick update on what's happening at REFEDS and eduGAIN. Half-hour break, and then we're back with some more presentations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Hideaki, and he can tell us all about what's happening in eduGAIN. And over to you, Hideaki. Thank you, Hideaki. Always interesting to hear what's happening with eduroam and the roaming service. Have we got any questions for Hideaki?
So do you think that this monetization model that universities are exploring is interesting? I mean, do you think anyone will follow up on it, or do you think that, does this mean that universities will outsource their Wi-Fi to different providers, and so those that they don't offer eduroam credentials for, it's just a model to charge visitors and students that haven't set up their devices?
I'm sorry, I can't get to your questions so clearly. So
do you think you know of any universities that are following this monetization model?
The monetization model, we are not interested in providing the service using the monetization model, but I've heard about some cases from the US and in some European countries, but we haven't talked about so much about OpenRoaming in Japan. So many universities even don't know there's monetization model. We don't want to support it. It's so complicated.
And do you have any city roaming members outside of Japan, or do you allow roaming beyond Japan?
Yes, it's possible to extend city roam outside Japan if other countries are interested in. And there's right now there's one university joined city roam and providing OpenRoaming as well on campus. And so if the countries are interested in, then it's possible.
Hideaki, I have a question regarding OpenRoaming. So please correct me if I'm wrong. So in order to get connected to OpenRoaming, so number one, the Wi-Fi infrastructure, which is the AP or the controller, must support the
passpoint.
Yeah, passpoint protocol, right?
Yes.
And also the end user's device as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So it means if the end user device doesn't support OpenRoaming, so they cannot connect to the OpenRoaming network.
Yeah, right. So, but the user device need to have a passpoint profile, OpenRoaming profile, and it's supported by eduroam cat already.
Yeah. So, well, the other day I tried using eduroam cat. I couldn't see the profile for Apple, but using the Let's Wi-Fi CA portal, yes, I saw the profile is added. So it means that, so basically if I would like to access an open roaming network using my eduroam credentials, so means my device need to support passpoint, and also the NRO must also support the DNS snapter to accept authentication requests from open roaming. Yeah. Okay.
But the DNS snapter records need to be configured at each university, not at NRO.
Okay, but because I think
At each IDP, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but in case like a .my, for example, so we set in our domain name, hang on, let me try to remember. I thought like all .my just forward to the eduroam Netherlands, and from there it will travel through. So means I don't need to ask each IDP to configure the DNS snapter, or am I incorrect?
So in the basic configuration model, each IDP must configure DNS snapter records, but there may be some solution. Maybe Paul is developing something.
Okay, all right. So maybe later I will consult you more on this.
Yeah.
And so Hideaki, did your slide before this, you can get the digital certificate from eduroam.org and connect to OpenRoaming directly. So that means you wouldn't have to have a NAPTA record that points to SurfNet. You could have a NAPTA record locally.
Yes, to the local roaming operator.
Yeah, so that means that short circuits the distance traveled for authentication.
Yes.
And what is the procedure for, is that a shared certificate that's handed out securely, or I can just talk to Paul and ask?
Ask Paul.
It does make sense if we enabled the APAN servers in Hong Kong and Sydney. If they did it, that would reduce the latency for certain NRENs to authenticate if that traffic.
It's also possible.
Or we could explore any cast.
Actually, using NAPTR is good. It's just that I mean, RedSec is much faster, more efficient. The only thing is that to get the certificate is quite strict procedure.
Yeah, but then we could look at potentially either any cast locations for that SurfNet box. So we could just turn the Asia Pac servers into any cast nodes for the same.
Yeah. But actually not that bad though for RedSec implementation, because the NRO can request on behalf of the IDP.
Yeah, if we talk about open roaming, it's possible to use regional APAN proxies. But if we want to connect some more operators locally, then I recommend each country to have a proxy for that. For example, we have a roaming agreement with Boingo and AT&T as well. So AT&T devices can be automatically connected in Tokyo, and not in Tokyo, not limited to Tokyo, but in Japan. Some more questions or comments?
Anything else for Hideaki? Well, thank you for presenting again.
Thank you very much.
You're a stalwart. You're always at APAN. It's great to see. And hopefully we'll be able to meet face to face at some time in the near future. Possibly China, possibly where is it? Nepal after that.
Or maybe e-research.
E-Research Australia. we can get that to happen. Okay, so moving on. I have a presentation to do on single logout. Just tidy up my screen a bit. Yeah. Okay, sharing screens. Let's try that one. So, okay, single logout. Logout, out. Should read these things before I present. Single logout. So what we're going to cover is a quick overview of what single logout is. An attempt at a quick demonstration. I'm not sure how well that will go, but we will see. Bit of a discussion on who really wants single logout. Is the configuration for single logout easy? What problems are we trying to solve with single logout? Some more problems that appear if you do try and implement single logout. How far do you really want to go with single logout? Is it something people really want to do and you have to put a lot of effort in, or is it something you just throw out? Here, it's best efforts and go for it. Have a quick look at some of the benefits of single logout. Some feedback from the field. I shot a question out to the Federation Operators Group and got some useful feedback and some references for you to look at your leisure. Okay, so our overview. So single logout is easy. Single login. Single login is easy in a federated place. So why is single logout so much harder? We've pretty much got single login, federated single login done and dusted. So to understand why single logout is so much harder, we need to understand what it is. What is actual single logout? What are we trying to achieve when we say I want, or a service provider or a user wants single logout? And does anyone really know? Is it a standard one answer? There is one answer to this question, or are there multiple answers? Do people have different opinions on what they think single logout is for them? Does a security person have one view? Does an end user have another view? Does a service provider operator have a different view again? Is there any consistent definition? I don't think there is for what single logout is. Everyone's really got their own view on what they want when it comes to single logout. And as I said, does it mean different things to different people? And how do you actually know if single logout's been successful if you're not sure what single logout actually is? So you really need to know what it is, have a common definition to be able to say, I've successfully completed single logout. Otherwise, you really don't know if you've completed it in everyone's view. So I found this definition of what single logout or global logout could be. And it sort of states that if a user wants to log out all the services, they choose the single logout. In addition to currently used services, the service provider and the IDP goes through all the service providers and asks them to log out of the user. And it also ends its session. So in this view, single logout is basically stopping or logging the person out of all services they've logged into, and the IDP and all sessions that are associated with those logins. So is that something that's possible? What does that still really mean? A user is logged out of all services. It stops access to each service. A user is logged out of their IDP, so that stops future single sign-on. A new login is required if somebody goes to a new service or an existing service they've been logged out of. The user can safely walk away from their machine. The next user can't access services as the previous user, supposedly protecting the user. So is that really what the user wants or expects from single logout or from logout? So I'm going to attempt a quick demonstration. I'm not sure how well this will go. I just tried it earlier. It was a bit of a failure, but we'll give it a crack. So I'm going to start up a new browser. So can everyone see that new browser I've started? I'll take silence as yes.
You can take silence, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll build this little dinky service provider. It's not finished yet. It's still got some other stuff I want to put onto it, but it will do for the moment. It's basically a little login thing, and it will demonstrate multi-factor authentication in the future, but I haven't finished that yet. This green box down here is a frame, an iframe, and it's basically showing the service provider session information from the service provider. So at the moment, the service provider that sits underneath this, which is a shibboleth service provider, is telling us that there's no valid session being found. So the user is not logged in to this particular service provider. So to log in, I'm going to click on the login button. It takes us to our discovery service. I have a special pre-configured IDP, which is this guy. And you'll see it's a standard shibboleth IDP. So I'll log in with a known username and password. And we can see the session information's changed down the bottom here. So it's filled in some information. Says we have an active session. It's got a life of 480 minutes. It's from my IP address. It's SAML2 and some other attributes. It's got some attributes that have been provided to this service. And I can actually dive into this service provider and there's more information I can see about myself. It's basically a dump of my attributes here. Not a really exciting service, but it's telling me that I've actually effectively logged in. I can now also go over here and just want to go there, log into a second service in the same browser. This is our official AAF attribute validator tool running in a test environment. I can log into that. I select the same IDP. And there was no login requirement because single sign-on happened, and it's showing me my attributes. So I've logged into two services. This thing over here, I should get rid of that. It shows me I've got an active session and the attribute validator. So I've logged in twice, and I'm also logged into my IDP. So how do I log out of these things? I haven't actually put a logout button, but I can do up here. I know the URL. I can go to that, and that's done a local logout. So it's effectively logged me out of the service only. That's fine, but it hasn't logged me out of the validator. So this is still active, and I'm still logged into the IDP. And I'll show you that I'm still logged into the IDP by going in. I'm trying to log in again. I go back here, hit the login button. It says I haven't got a valid session for this service. I'll go back to my FTX IDP, and single sign-on happened. So even though I'd logged out of the service, I wasn't logged out of the IDP. Not really good enough because I can just go back to the service, hit the login button, go to the IDP, automatically logged in. So the user isn't secure at all. So the next trick I can do is I can do a logout at the IDP. And this time I'm using going to the IDP's logout page. And this is what Shibboleth provides us with Shibboleth version 4. It gives me a locally log out locally, which will end the SSO session at the IDP only, or a global logout. And if you don't click either quickly enough, it does the global logout for you automatically. But unfortunately, I haven't really configured this properly because it's telling me that it tried to log out the sessions that I had at these service providers, but they both, it failed with both of those. So what it tried to do was send off a request through the browser to each of those IDPs in turn and say, hey, IDP, sorry, to the service in turn. So, hey, service, can you please log this person out, this session out, and report back if you've been successful. Now, what's actually happened, if we go back to that service, is that this one actually logged out. The logout actually occurred because we can see down here there's no valid session, but the service provider itself didn't send back a response to the IDP saying it's successfully logged out. So the user's now a little bit confused. Was I logged out? Wasn't logged out? The IDP said I wasn't logged out of that service, but the service is telling me that I was logged out of that service. So if something breaks between the IDP logging out and telling other services to log out, then the user will be in all sorts of grief, not knowing whether they're logged in or logged out to individual services. The other thing is that when you do log out using single logout, it always takes you back to the IDP. That might not be something that the service provider wants. I'm going to tidy this demonstration up and make it more presentable. And it's actually, I'll put it on a GitHub repository and you can then have a look at it, play with it. It'll also have some stuff about how to log in with multi-factor authentication and how to signal that backwards and forwards. I'm doing this as a bit of a sort of background project that I'm doing to assist the AF, doing some of its actual other work that with higher levels of assurance. So anyway, that's the demo. It's pretty ordinary. But it does show that logout does sort of do something, but not exactly what I would expect. So back to the slides. So the first question is, was this what you expected single logout would do? Logout is initiated at a service provider. Well, that didn't actually work because I hadn't got that configured properly. I should have actually had a logout button that would have taken me back to the IDP, which is when would have said, here, you logged into these other services as well. What do you want to do with that? That's going to be in the more fuller demo that I put together. So the service provider provides a logout button to their users. The service provider owner is protecting their users and their services by providing that logout option. But do they understand or care about what it means to other services that the user is using? Or the user is SSO'd session 2. So the service provider, I don't think really cares that the user is logged into other services. Their main goal is to make sure that the person's effectively logged out of their service. They also might not understand that they need to have the user logged out of the IDP to be effectively logged out of both their service, or out of their service as well. The end user ends up at the IDP, not at the service. So the user is logged out as a service provider. Why are they ending up at some odd page at their IDP? Will the user understand what just happened? Is this what they wanted to happen when they clicked on the logout button? Was the user expecting to go back to the home page as a service rather than back to their IDP? Where did the service provider expect the user to end up after logging out? I bet it wasn't the user's IDP. In fact, they would expect that they'd be ending back at the service provider's homepage or login page so that the user can then come back and log in again if they needed to do some more. The logout only occurs in the browser. Other browsers still may have active sessions. So I'm a user who uses many different types of browsers. I've got Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, or whatever they call it now, Opera, and Safari, and something else, some Chinese browser, because I have different sessions with different users that I'm logging in all the time. Would I expect single logout to log out all of those browser sessions? That's, I don't think, will ever occur. And again, what happened when I log out? Only the sessions that were attached to that particular browser session are logged out. Nothing else is logged out. So there's still lots of stuff on other browsers that are potentially logged in. I'm not sure, and I haven't tested this yet, about what happens if somebody's using, what do they call that, protected mode or the privacy mode. If they're actually logged out, or if that's a completely different session that they're dealing with. Yeah, private browser sessions. I'm not sure what happens with that. And I'll do some experimenting to see if private browser sessions of the same browser are logged out as well as those that aren't private. So has the user really been single logged out of everything? I think the answer there is no. And it's going to be really not easy to do across multiple sessions and multiple browsers. So just taking a different look, who really wants single logout? Prior to APAN53, I asked the Federation Operators Group, FOG at list.refeds.org, who was using single logout, who was requesting single logout, and it mostly came from security folk running a valuable or restricted resource or service. So they were concerned about their service and inappropriate use of that service by inappropriate users. There's probably one or two paranoid users who want to log out of everything, but nowadays, since everyone carries their own device with them, or their own laptop, own phone, they are sharing devices, nobody's really clicking log out anymore. They just sort of close their lid and off they go. When they open the lid, things are still logged in, they continue on where they left off. Super users or developers who want to access services with different identities. And that's a very small cohort of folk, of which I'm one, but I get around that by having different browsers to use. And there are probably some others, but as I said, most folk don't really want to do logout, single logout. The other group that I sort of may be interested in single logout are those who provide shared services, computer labs and so forth. But that's not really thing. So configuration is easy-ish. It's fairly easy to configure Shibboleth to do single logout, but is it easy to make it do single logout for other service providers and identity providers? There's plenty of different varieties of IDPs and services providers out there. For Shibboleth, it's well documented. There's a few options to tweak, and the logout page to brand to your own institution. And there's some metadata requirements. You need to advertise your single logout endpoints. They need to be registered in the IDP's metadata, and then you're done. For the SP, it's also well documented. It's configured out of the box. It also requires a single logout endpoint to be registered in the metadata. And I think that's what was missing. The endpoints of one of the IDP or the SP in my demo were missing. So there was no way that the service provider could signal back that the logout was successful. What about other software? There's plenty of flavors, as I said. Simple SAML PHP, I know, has a fairly good logout system. How does ADFS, Azure AD, Okta, Google, Ping Federate, F5 security thing, and all the others commercial products deal with single logouts? Do they follow the SAML standards, or do they do their own thing, or do they not do anything at all? Still more things to investigate in this space if we really choose to. So do they support single logout? And if so, how is it configured? And how do you configure it as an IDP, or how do you configure it as the service provider with that software? So if you're using that sort of software, you need to investigate that stuff. And how will they behave? Will they behave the same way that will they end up with the IDP? do they implement the standard correctly, or do they really care? Have they already gone past single logout as a thing that you really worry about? And some of them have a bit of an advantage because they're a bit of a hub and spoke. So if you log out of the central IDP, then makes it a bit easier to log out of all of the services that are attached at that point to some level, but still there's a lot of stuff that's sort of keeping sessions open at services, even if you do log out everyone at the middle. What about single logout and proxies? A lot of federations are putting up proxies. We have two, at least two in the AAF. How well does single logout traverse through a proxy? The proxy would need to take the role of a role in single logout, signaling all services that the user is connected to through that proxy to log out. I don't know if proxies have been configured to do this stuff, so I don't know if they can do it. I know that our two proxies don't do it. Rapid Connect and Central don't have an option that will pass through single logout because we haven't really worried about it. What would the user experience be for single logout across a proxy? And how does single logout potentially work across protocols? So for us, Central service, it's got SAML on one side and it's got OIDC on the other side. So there's a translation in protocols that you've got to worry about. Does OIDC support single logout? No, I haven't really got that far yet either. And Vlad's raised his hand, I see.
Yes, well, I just wanted to chip in on that. I'm using Shibboleth IDP in proxying mode for our hosted IDP. And I've looked into the documentation there for single logout in proxying mode. And the documentation literally says, if SLO is on fire, SLO in proxying is quantum physics. So they decided not to support it because just expressing what you really want out of it would be way too hard.
Yep, I can understand that. Thanks for that, Vlad. Okay. Stacked IDPs, which is what Vlad was just talking about, which is proxying through from Shibboleth to some other IDP. Would logging out of the federation also log the user out of their enterprise service, the enterprise IDP? User logged into service A is also logged out of service B, their SAML IDP, their enterprise IDP, their enterprise services, their potentially HR, payroll, or LMS, all that sort of stuff. Does it really make sense to try and kill all of that stuff that a person's logged into? And as Vlad just said, the piece in the middle, we call ours Rapid. I'm not sure what Vlad calls his, but it's a proxy from Shibboleth through to another IDP, and they've chosen not to implement the passing through of that single logout. So problems to be solved. Another problem that would need to be looked at is IDPs that utilize the SPNAGO, where they're doing desktop authentication through to the browser. Will the user be logged out of their desktop if they log out of service A? That really makes sense. So every time you think about single logout, it just gets harder and harder, more confusing for the end user. It's a real mess. From the service provider's perspective, I want my users to end up at my services homepage after logging out, not their own, not the IDPs. Because the user might want to log back into that service. They might have forgotten to do something, but they're now logged out of everything, potentially. So the question about where the user ends up when the single logout is finished, just out their IDP, with a list of services that may or may not have logged out of. Single logout seems to be a per browser session type thing. So if I log into if I single log out service A, my Chrome browser, am I still logged into service B when I'm using Firefox to access that service? So single logout doesn't work for users that use multiple browsers. So how far do you want to go if you want to do anything with single logout? This is the question I'm sort of pondering myself for the AAF. If you go to the very minimal, just use the logout at the service, where the user is still logged into the IDP. The user can log in to other services. It's not secure, and there's no real benefit for a federated login situation toward just doing a logout at the service. Federated single logout, you're logged out of the IDP, you might be logged out of the services that are within a browser session. So you can't log into other services, again, within that browser session. It's better, but it's only for that particular browser session. So if you've got multiple browsers open or different browsers open, then you're still not really any better off. And restart the machine is probably the only real way to make sure that somebody's completely logged out. And I'm not sure where that do in temporal things come from. That should not be there. So really the only effective way to log somebody out is to restart a machine. If you're running a lab with shared machines, and I used to work at a university that had many labs, had many shared machines, when a user walked away, the machine would automatically, if it wasn't logged out, reboot itself within 5 minutes of logging in, of the user not doing anything at that machine. And then it would restart itself, basically clearing everything. So the benefits of single logout, given single logout doesn't really work, the only real benefit I can see is that it just ticks a box for the security team. Makes them feel a bit happier that somebody's tried to do single logout. But if you actually explain to them what's happening, they're probably freak and say, well, it's not really very good, is it? Some information I've gathered from the fields. As I said, I recently asked the FOG group what they've been doing or who's been doing anything with single logout. Basically, a few federations have had a look, but no one is doing anything serious about it. Some observations: most people have and use their own devices and never really log out. For shared devices, single logout is not a security solution. User training and awareness. Log out of the machine, not the service. And here's some references for you if you really want to sort of have a bit of a deeper dive into single logout. The Shibboleth site has a single logout issues page, which has been there forever, and it goes into some more detail about some of the things I've been talking about. There's a web application adaptation for single logout. That's again from the Shibboleth guys, about how you could potentially do single logout, going right down to the application level. From SurfNet, they've written a nice paper about how relevant is logging out in 2020. And that's a bit of a review of what people are currently doing, how useful, and who is doing single logout. It's an interesting read. And in common, they're looking, or will be looking at single logout in the future, and it's in their to be looked at plans, but they haven't really gone any further than that. So that's single logout. It's not as pretty as you would have imagined, if you had imagined it at all.
Vlad had his hand up at one point. He seemed to have put his hand down again. I think he wants to speak.
Yes. Yeah, Terry moved on to another slide, so I thought I would leave it to the end. I have a handful of comments, if I may. First, I had not replied to your message on FOG. Sorry, I should have gotten to it. It's in Tuakere. I'm configuring each IDP to support SLO, but that's where it ends. So for most services, it's like I would get the green tick boxes when I hit the SLO page on the IDP. But what I probably myself see as the biggest issue with SLO is okay, it kills the SAML session at the target service this way, but in many cases, the application uses a derived session that's derived from the SAML session. So even with the validator, I was wondering whether you'll do that in your demo. When it killed the SAML session at the validator, if you reloaded the page, it would still have been a happy validator because you have the Rails session that's still alive that got created based on the login. And I know Shibboleth SP has some hooks that you could do some tricks in redirecting the user into an application logout and then back to the SAML handling and back to the IDP and complete the dance. But the dance can break if any part doesn't pass the ball back on. And if I'm now to answer whether I'm doing something in single logout, I have this thing in my wish list, and that's how far I got.
Yes, the other concern I've got is if you've logged into 20 or 30 services, how long is it going to take to do the dance all through those services?
That's one thing, and at least the user would see the progress with the tick boxes showing. But the main question is it really what the user expects? And I think there are different scenarios, different use cases for why a user would do logout. And one is, I'm done with this machine and I want to leave. But that's really hard to do unless you wipe the machine. Even the restart, that's when I raised my hand the last time. The sessions should be held in session cookies, which were originally meant to be discarded on browser restart. But some browsers started preserving them across restarts of the browser. And a restart of the machine is just close the browser process, reboot the machine, then maybe start the browser again. Hey, session cookies are still here. So one of our members was asked for help. So what's to do in their kiosks, with their kiosks, where they have kiosks, computers in open public spaces where a user can walk there, access a page, log in. And a few minutes after walking away and no activity, it not only reboots, it completely wipes everything. So they were then concerned only about the remaining risk. What if someone comes back during the few minutes between the user walking away and the machine wiping itself? And that's the open risk. Yeah, I think that's most of my comments. One more was for your use case with multiple browsers. Firefox has containers that lets you pretend you have separate browsers in a single real browser. Isolated spaces for cookies. Yep,
so that's even worse.
Yeah, I always thought of the logout in the context of a single browser. That's like, I've done something here, and if it's a different browser, it would have been on a different computer. So I would consider that out of scope. Yep. But that's just different in the difference in the
just a different view of what single logout could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the university I used to work at had the same thing. When a user walked away, the machine was basically re-imaged before the next user came along.
Yeah.
So Farhan, you had some comments?
From my experience when I promoting identity federation to the university, it's like almost always had a heated discussion on this logout issue. It's like discussing the side effect of COVID-19 vaccine to people. So anyway, usually what I would do is, single logout, there is no really permanent solution on that. There's some workaround, also has some limitation as well. Usually I just say that, well, if we compare the benefit of the identity federation compared with some, actually it's not limitation, it's just that it was designed to do so. The positive thing is more than the limitation. So at the end, they just accept it and try just live with it. Is it? And I think in here in Malaysia, at least the number of like a kiosk is reduced. Number one, because each person at least they have their own devices like a smartphone, for example. And also because of the pandemic, is not recommended to use like a shared devices like in the common place due to the touching. Yeah, so I think generally is now the community start accepting it in Malaysia and really press the issue about the SLO again.
Yeah. So it's really about a risk assessment.
Yeah.
And reducing the risk.
Yep, correct.
And Brook's comment about has a security team ever pulled the plug on a service because of lack of SLO? And to my knowledge in the AF, no, we haven't lost the service because there was no single logout.
Yeah, I think this is this is an academic discussion, because the use cases, like the Venn diagrams that have to intersect, single logout really only works on shared computers, which are, it's only interesting for shared computers, and that's a diminishing set of your install base these days. And also shared computers have lots of other risks. That's why they have to get re-imaged by unis, because they don't want the earlier person to have installed any spyware, malware, Bitcoin mining tools or anything else. And so that's the same issue with internet cafes. You should actually be looking at doing multi-factor authentication ahead of trying to solve the single logout problem. And I think after a decade of it not really being solved, it's maybe more an academic experiment that will become extinct over time in its relevance.
So the one shared computer use case is actually a result of the pandemic, and families working at home where they've only got one computer, but 3 children want to share it or have to share it to do their schoolwork. And there was a use case where they wanted to ensure that the student A or child A wasn't cheating or copying or getting access to child B's content from the same household. But again, turning the machine off or giving the different user login credentials at the machine level rather than at the browser level would probably solve that.
Yeah, but I think in case like one family sharing the same computer, I think most of operating system now support of multi-users. Yeah. So let's say the brother, I'm done, or maybe he forgot to log out, so the sister can, okay, I just log out, I want to log into my account. That's it.
And Hideiki's put in some comments, introduce short TTLs and auto reauth as an option, but how short do you make that TTL? Depends. And he says, ultimately all shared computers should be equipped with walk-away logout mechanisms. Home computing use case sharing is interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's good that you brought that up, because that's a bigger problem, and that's a problem in Tasmania when all the students were learning from home. When you do have, one big box computer and 3 kids expecting to use it, as well as a parent working from home, that was the digital divide still exists even in Australia.
Yep.
Yeah, and to that, I would say, if the people know what they are doing, it's easy to solve. And for example, the Firefox containers I referred to earlier could be like you partition the browser. That's assuming the people would not intentionally jump into someone else's space. So you can have the spaces just, you do your thing here, I have my thing there, and we agree you don't touch it. If you need to really protect it, you can use the private window or incognito window, which discards all cookies when you close it. So that does the SLO for you. That's a self-wiping mechanism. But then you need the users to know what they are doing. And if you just place a logout button there and they would expect it does the right thing, And for that, the wipe all sessions use case is probably the expected behavior. But not if you just want to log with a different account to get admin privileges, be a different user. But if you are someone who uses multiple accounts, you at least know enough to find a solution yourself.
Okay. I think we'll wrap that particular topic up now. And our next topic is iFIRExMAN. So I get to have a break. I'm going to hand that over to Farhan.
Okay, give me a moment. All right, so thanks, Terry. Right, so I would like to do some presentation and some announcement as well on the next project, which is the continuity of the iFIRE project. It's called as iFIRExMAN. So iFIRExMAN stands for iFIRE Extension for Managed Application Network. So the proposal was jointly proposed by Suhaimi, me, Terry, Hideaki, and also Brook as well. Oops. Okay, so some background on the project. So the TFIM group has had a significant contribution to the development and deployment of federated identity technology through the Asi Connect membership. So actually, I could recall there are several countries that has benefited from this community. In fact, from its inauguration up to today, I think I can count at least there's a 1, 2, 3, probably 4, could be more countries has their identity federation infrastructure up and running, and now get connected through the eduGAIN interfederation network. So just some background about this, some of this project. It was initially kicked off by Jian via the Backfire project, and then it has transitioned to a community activity led by AAF via iFIRE. And then both program has successfully brought several ASEAN Connect country members to be part of the eduGAIN. So to ensure there is a continuous support for the effort and activities, a project called iFIRE Extension for Managed Application Network, or iFIRExMAN, was proposed and approved by the ASEAN Connect. So the project duration is more or less about 12 months. It started, I think, 2 days ago until the 6th March next year. So the project itself has 3 main activities or programs. First one is the training program and best practice development. So this is something like what we had before in the iFIRE, but I mean, the proposer of the project realized that some countries, they may need to have sort of like a restart of the initiative because of some changes in the leadership or in the organization structure. So maybe they may need to restart the Identity Federation initiative and start again from the beginning. So looking at that, so we would like to continue to have the training program and also best practice, particularly for the federation that already up and running, but would like to upgrade or improve the operation to be even better than now. So we hope, this training program, officially we would like to have at the APAN meetings at APAN54 and 55 if it's a back to be a face-to-face meeting, or alternatively, if APAN54 is still not possible for a face-to-face meeting, we may have e-Research Australasia 2022 as the alternative event to have this training or face-to-face meeting. And the second activity is to develop an identity federation software ecosystem based on cloud native technology that support cloud hosted by the NREN and also the on-premises by the campus implementation by setting up a community-based incubator infrastructure for new identity federation pilot operation. So I will explain the activity, this second activity at the later slide in more detail. And the third one is the IAM Ready, which is an identity and access management and roaming competition. So basically here is to encourage the participant of the project to develop some application or come with some innovation in area of identity and access management plus eduroam. Okay. So what is the eligibility to become participant? So number one, it must be from the Asi Connect country or economy members and able to provide a commitment or contribution to the success of the project. And for the activity 1 and 2, it should be or it's preferable to be a RAN operator, unless there is no RAN operator in that country or economy, or identity federation operator is not a RAN operator, not the same. Okay, like for example, in Malaysia and Australia, the identity federation operator is not a RAN operator, is not the same. Okay, and for the activity 3, female engineer participation is highly encouraged. Although it's open for both male and female, but if there's a female engineer would like to participate, if let's say we would like to encourage more. So the participation for each activity will be made separately because each activity may have their own requirement or some more detail. So what is the benefit of the project to the participant? So number one is to accelerate the adoption or implementation of identity federation and eduroam, particularly by adopting the result from the activity number 2 and also activity number 1 as well. Sorry, for the first one is from the activity number 2, and then networking, which is you are able to meet people, the fellow identity federation operators, and also some identity federation expert as well. And then the capacity building means the outcome from the activity 1 is you able to get some knowledge about how to set up an identity federation and also how to manage or operate the an identity federation, and then also access to the identity federation expert. So we may able to invite some expert in the identity federation field as sort of like a guest lecturer or guest trainer during the event. And we also able to provide some funding, particularly the travel grant, to support you to come to the iFIRExMAN event either at APAN54 or eResearch Australasia or in APAN55. And also we able to provide some equipment or computing resources as well. So for the activity 2, we able to provide a server, a physical server that to help you to set up the identity federation infra. So after the project, then the server is yours, so you can continue using it. And for activity 3, for the either hackathon or application development, we also able to provide you a virtual machine for you to work on or develop your application. So some detail activity. Okay, so for number 1, so basically we continue operate like in the previous APAN52 and the current APAN without the financial support. Okay, since it's an online event or virtual event, so it doesn't cost anything. Of course, we may expect that 54 and 55 would return to the face-to-face. 55 maybe, but 54 could be 50-50, depending on the travel restriction for each country. Okay, so but if let's say APAN54 is not feasible physically, and eResearch Australia could be an alternative event location. As we know, Australia has opened their borders, so I think it's become much easier to travel compared with China maybe. Okay, so a travel grant or support will be provided to attend the event in person or face-to-face. So if you were the participant of the what's the previous before iFIRE, it was Backfire. So yeah, I mean the similar travel grant will be provided as well. So for this activity is led by AAF or by Terry et al. Okay, so for the second activities, so basically the tools that we're going to develop will take the work of SIFULAN based on our, because as you know from our presentation on Monday, that we use Cloud Native to run our federation and also IDP as a service. So the idea is to generalize the tools that we have developed to be able to be exported or used at the another country. Okay, potentially to the particularly to the country where or economies that has no identity federation yet. So this would help to accelerate the adoption and also the implementation. So this also will combine with the eduroam and also federated identity as a service offering that can be deployed at NREN and institutional level. So the server to run this application will be provided. I think in the past it was a project. I'm not remember whether it's Backfire or even earlier project that each NREN who participated in that program are provided with a server to run eduroam NRO. So pretty much the same the idea. So for this activity, SIFULAN is the lead. Okay, so the third activity for the competitions. So basically to create an identity access management and roaming grand challenge competition that provide incentive for wider Asi Connect community to participate in federating local and open source applications. So there will be like local event, could be local and regional events. So for example, it can be like run in one particular country, or even can also run at several region, like for example, Southeast Asia or South Asia, as long as in the Asia Pacific region. And some competing resources like a virtual machine will be provided to the participant if required. And if you need some assistance from the expert or guidance, maybe we could also able to connect the participant with the expert for some guidance as well. And there are some awards will be given to the winners of the competition. And a travel grant and support will be provided to attend iFIRExMAN event in person or face-to-face for selected participants to present their works. Okay, so one more thing, the participant for activity 3 is not necessarily the same person with those who involved in activity 1. It's like an open, so like us from either student or researcher or even some IT staff, they can participate in this I Am Ready program. So it's more broad. So Brook is the lead for this activity. So this is the timeline that we're looking at. So currently we are in the phase of kick-offing the project and completing all the paperwork. So once all the paperwork settled, then we will start calling the do the invitation for participation from each country or economy. So thank you.